Now let's use the supply and demand analysis to figure out the equilibrium of the factors market. All right, and here the first thing we need to do is we need to derive the labor demand curve. Okay, and we believe on the basis of the Mpl curve, it should be quite easy for us to do this. Okay, it is easy, but it's also a little tricky. Okay, now here this is the Mpl curve we already discussed before. Okay, now on the vertical axis you find this is a units of output, because the marginal product of labor is always measured in the units of output, right? When we add one more unit of labor, how many units of output we can get, that's how we define Mpl, right? So the vertical axis is the output, okay? And the horizontal axis is the units of labor, right? So this is how many units of labor we used in our production. And we find this a downward sloping curve because of, I hope you still remember, law of diminishing returns. Okay, let me write it here. So this downward sloping curve tells us it's law of diminishing returns to labor. All right. Now here, if we want to say this Mpl curve is the labor demand curve, what would you say? Does that make sense to you? You can take this as a pop quiz, okay, to test how solid your understanding of the demand curve is. All right, I strongly encourage you to pause the video and think about it. Okay, why we believe the Mpl curve is the labor demand curve. Okay, how this magic thing works. All right. Okay, now let's talk about it. We said that this is an Mpl curve, right? And on the vertical axis, we said this is a units of output because that's how Mpl is measured, right? How many units of output when we add one more unit of labor, right? If you remember, in the previous section, we already derived mathematically that because of the profit maximizing behavior, Mpl, marginal product of labor, equals what? If you remember, this guy equals W over P, right? That is the condition we derived, right? Here, W is the nominal wage and P is the price of the output, okay? And we said that W over P is your real wage. It's this guy here, real wage. Okay. In other words, you could imagine, this hypothetical situation. At the end of the month, each worker, instead of receiving a paycheck, a paper paycheck, they receive what they produced, okay, as the payment of their wage. Okay. So previously we said, like a Goodyear factory in Venezuela ever paid its workers with the tires they produced. Okay, that's what really happened in on the ground. Okay, all right. Now, because the vertical axis is the real wage and the horizontal axis is the quantity, so the Mpl curve shows us the relationship between the price and the quantity, right? In other words, there's a one-on-one relationship between the price and the quantity. But here, the price is just the real price of labor, right? So in this case here, the price is W over P, right? And the quantity is just L, okay? So because this curve shows the one-on-one relationship between the price of labor and the quantity of labor, of course, that's the labor demand curve. That's how we define the demand curve, right? Now, once you understand these, the rest of this equilibrium analysis is just a piece of cake. All right. Now we're gonna just add the labor supply to this graph, and we can figure out the equilibrium condition. Okay. Labor supply. It seems like we haven't discussed the labor supply for a while, but if you go all the way back to the beginning of this chapter, when we made a bunch of crazy assumptions, one of them is we assume that all inputs are fixed, or all factors are fixed, including capital, labor, and even technology, right? Now, if labor is fixed, how could we show that on the graph? Again, I encourage you to pause the video and think about this on your own. Okay, if the variable is if the supply is fixed, then how could we show that on the graph of the supply and demand? All right, so here, because it's fixed, it doesn't vary across the real wage, right? In other words, no matter how high or how low the workers will get paid, the quantity of labor supplied stays the same. So it got to be a vertical line. Okay, it's a vertical line. It's totally independent of the change in price. Okay. Now, with this vertical labor supply curve and the downward sloping labor demand curve, or MPL, then we can find their interaction. That gives us the equilibrium real wage. Okay, equilibrium real wage, and the quantity of labor, again, that's given, right? That's fixed. Okay. So here we find that the real wage adjusts to equate labor demand with supply. All right. So this is the market equilibrium for labor. All right. And similarly, you can figure out the market equilibrium for capital. Okay, so here I give a worksheet number 4 to you guys to figure this out on your own. Okay, as a practice. Again, if you get confused, you can go back and check out, or recheck out the previous videos, okay, the QRL videos. And also, this video when we look at the graphical analysis. All right. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is we will figure out, the income distribution.